Welcome to Critters. This week, we're finishing up layoff signs and what to do about them. The questions this cast answers are, what should I look for to anticipate layoffs? And what should I do if I see those signs? Are you having trouble making notes as we talk and having to rewind? Or perhaps you just wanted a quick refresher about a subject and you've had to listen to a whole podcast? We know that time is a resource that we can't get back. Save yourself time and energy by buying a personal license. You'll be able to download a white paper for each of our podcasts, not just bullet points, and you'll be able to access those show notes on your phone. Have manager tools in your pocket. Sign up for a personal license. Go to manager-tools.com and type #license in the search bar. Last week we were talking about layoffs and how layoffs are not usually, they don't usually come out of the blue. There's usually some hints, and we talked about what to do if you think there's layoffs coming. We got through 5 activities, and now we have to pick up again. So we have a couple more things to do, and then we're going to talk about what those hints are and what to look out for. So next up, we have activate your network.
Good. This means getting in touch with everyone you know. It means recreating those attachments, making sure there's information flowing. You're not looking for these people to have a job for you now or maybe ever. You're just plugging into an information stream, which will get you or maybe help you get the information you need to get a job. The likelihood, right? The chance that just as you contact someone you once knew, they have an opening and you fill their needs and they have a budget to meet your salary is really low. So we're not expecting activation of our network to result in an offer after a week. That's a longer term endeavor, 3 or 6 months. And Wendy, you and I have talked about this multiple times. I think we've kind of batted around like this discussion about if you activate your network now when you don't need anything, it's just, hi, how are you? How are things going? If you wait, then you're going to feel, maybe not, maybe you guys are different than me, but I assume that we would feel kind of guilty because we're asking for something. And maybe we're not actually asking, but the tenor of the conversation is it's leading that way. There's some anxiety in the conversation. If you just reach out now, pick 5 people, pick 10, pick 25 and list them alphabetically and just reach out. Say, hey, they have stuff going on. Check in. Then later, maybe if you need their help, you can ask for it without feeling guilty because you'll have rekindled that relationship and not for a reason that was, I don't want to say selfish,
all
but
about you.
Yes, exactly. Okay, good. So we activate our network.
And next up, practice interviewing. So a lot of people are laid off after 10 or 15 or 20 years with the same employer. And maybe they didn't even have an interview to get into the company. A lot of people don't, if it's been that long. But whether it's been 2 years or 22, you need to practice interviewing. If it's been 22 years, it's obvious why. You haven't had an interview in 22 years, and you may not have had one then. You may just have known someone. So it's obvious why you have to practice interviewing. But if it's only been 2 years, you might think, oh, well, I don't need to practice because I only did this a couple of years ago. But you haven't interviewed with the accomplishments you've had in the last 2 years. And those accomplishments are likely to be the best examples that you would want to use in interviews because the more senior we get or the more experience we get, the better our examples are. They're also likely to be more relevant to a new job, right? If you interviewed 2 years ago and working on instant messaging, that's what you do. Instant messaging has changed a huge amount in the last 2 years. There's all sorts of different technologies being used for instant messaging that weren't being used then. And in the next 2 years, it will change again. So if you want to talk about those accomplishments that you've had in the last 2 years that are relevant to what's happening today, you need to practice. And everyone thinks, I don't need to practice. I can describe what I do. Yes, you can. But you don't sound good. You don't sound fluent. You don't get everything in your mind, like straight in your mind in a way that's easy to understand for other people unless you practice. So there's something in Toastmasters called table topics, and it's 2 to 3 minutes of impromptu speaking. So somebody asks you a question and you just answer it, which sounds really easy until you try and do it. So somebody will say, what's your favorite country to visit? And in 2 to 3 minutes, you've got to think about, okay, what is my favorite country? Now I've got to line up, okay, these are the things I like about it. This maybe is the thing I don't like about it, because you've got to fill 3 minutes. So, and you've got to do it in an order and in a way that everybody follows what you're saying. And it's really, really hard. And that's basically what you're doing in an interview. Somebody's asking you a question. You don't know what it will be in advance. And now you've got to marshal your thoughts. You've got to get the evidence lined up so that you can answer in a way that's positive and persuasive and that the interviewer can follow. So a lot of people think they can do it off the cuff, and having sat in millions of interviews, most people can't. So practice.
Then we want to remind you of one of the most important things. And we want you to remember, don't stop working. In our guidance about effective layoff announcement response, which the title of which that podcast is really long, the Career Tools Effective Layoff Announcement Response, we say deliver results. And this is first because it is by far the most important. And no matter what else anybody suggests to you, no matter what anyone says, the most important thing you can do when impending layoffs are announced or suspected is to deliver results for which you're accountable. We go on in that cast to further discuss some of the reasons for doing so. And frankly, maybe you just need this one. Getting results is valuable to you. When the company is looking at who to lay off, having good results moves you out of the maybe pile and into the keep pile. And if it doesn't, and you get laid off anyway, it's something to talk about in interviews. Imagine going to an interview and being asked, what's your biggest accomplishment in the last 6 months? And having to say, I don't have any. I knew I was going to get laid off, so I checked out. I wasn't doing anything. I was Pinteresting at work. No, that's terrible. What we'd rather you do is be able to show some accomplishments from the last 6 months, even if that role ended poorly. If you can keep working and keep getting results, that is a strong testament to your dedication.
Yeah, and we said earlier in the cast that we did last week, or in the part of this cast that we did last week, we talked about a company divesting itself of a department or a section of the company, and the market being flooded with people with the same skills. And all of those people were competing for the 3 or 4 jobs that were in that market. If you're in that position and you're competing with other people that you have been working with for a scarce number of jobs with your skill set, then it's the person who's going to be able to describe the best accomplishments that's going to get the job. Not, the person who checked out, who just turned up because they knew, if I turn up for the next 12 weeks, then I get my layoff payment. That person just isn't as competitive as the person who can say, in the last 12 weeks, the company was winding down, but I still did X and Y and Z. And even if those things aren't relevant to the job, right? Maybe you talked about somebody who was in hotel auditing and the company stopped doing that. There was no hotels to audit in the last 6 months. There were no audits started, but the people who stayed in that department until the company closed it altogether were doing kind of cleanup work. Well, that's still an accomplishment you can talk about, right? You can talk about the number of files you closed. You can talk about the quality of the work you did. You can talk about the customer service that you carried on doing, even though the company wasn't servicing those customers anymore. So you've still got something to talk about, rather than the person who is just turning up each day and just playing out the time. It reminds me, I can't think, because I'm not very good at sports analogies. There's a thing where a team is winning and basically they just kind of keep the ball so that the time runs out, like the end of the game comes, and they don't try and score, but they don't.
Oh, it's in football. You essentially take a knee on the down. So if there's less than 2 minutes left in the game, you can take a knee instead of running the ball for the 10 yards if you're already winning.
Yeah.
But that's a slightly abbreviated version of the rules, and that's the NFL version. So it doesn't work everywhere.
You could do that, or you could carry on trying. I'm sure I've heard sports commentators be derisive of the people who do that versus the people that keep trying. And that's because that's what we like to see, that we want to see people trying, and we want to carry on and use all the time we have to build accomplishments that will support us in the interviews that we're going to have.
Yeah. You know what's funny is the reason for that rule in the NFL is so that your team doesn't get injured. And so we're not going to run those extra 10, 20, 30 yards. And you're already injured if you're in a layoff situation. You're not saving yourself any injury. In fact, doing this, not delivering results, would actually cause you more injury. So the whole preface of that idea does not work for you guys if you're in a layoff situation. You're just making it worse.
I'm glad you know something about sports to help me out there.
I know all the things about football because I have an addiction, like a problem. And, honestly, Wendy, silly. We'd be really bad business people if we didn't mention that we have the resume workbook and interviewing series on the website for purchase, right? You can go to our website and get the resume workbook and the interviewing series. And these products make your job search much easier, much more effective. And if you don't agree with us, we'll give you your money back.
I don't remember ever giving somebody their money back.
No one's ever requested it, and we totally will. I mean, hopefully people understand how much we want to help. That's why all the casts are free. We want to help. We want to make your job search, your career search easier and as effective as possible so that you can have fulfilling lives. So if you go to the website, you can type hashtag resume workbook or hashtag interview series into the search bar. The website is manager-tools.com in case you're listening on some other podcast catcher situation. Come to the website and look for those products if you're searching. We want to help. That's why we do this.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about the signs to look for. And every employee really has a duty to know the signs and to act upon them, because employees have what's called a fiduciary duty to a company. And that means that you have a responsibility to not waste the company money and to do things which are in the interests of the company. It's a kind of legal thing that most people don't know they even have, but they do. And so you need to understand the big picture. You need to understand that some of these signs mean that the company is struggling and you have a duty to help them because, in part, that's what you're paid for. And if you don't understand the big picture, then you can make mistakes on a ground level that will further hurt the company. And for yourselves, you need to know what's going on so that you can make appropriate career decisions, right? If we did career tools for organizations, we wouldn't call it career tools. We call it organization tools. It's for you and it's for individuals, and we want you to make the most of it. And so we want you to have successful careers. And so that's why we want you to know what to look out for.
Mm-hmm. So one of the situations that you might be in is that the company lost money. Obviously, the most obvious sign of impending layoffs is the company losing money. And at this point, we recommend that you get your resume ready and start actively looking for something new. The loss that we're talking about, that we're discussing, could be an outright loss. They made less revenue than costs, or it can be a loss relative to the previous period. For example, layoffs at BuzzFeed in January 2019 came as a result of the company missing revenue targets in 2017. At the same time, similar companies were also making layoffs due to declines in digital advertising revenue eating away at revenue in general.
And we said right at the beginning that layoffs don't come suddenly. Layoffs shouldn't be a surprise. And, we just said that BuzzFeed missed their revenue targets in 2017 and the layoffs came in 2019. So if you were smart and you worked at BuzzFeed, you had a year and a half to find something new and to get out of digital advertising, or at least digital advertising in the way that they're in it, and to find somewhere that was more stable. Publicly traded companies are reported, usually their results are reported in the Wall Street Journal or industry magazines, those kind of things, because a publicly traded company losing money usually affects the whole industry, not just the people at that company. So, for example, when car manufacturers lose money, there's a negative effect on all the suppliers of the raw materials and the parts, and then the places where those people spend the money. If there's a huge car plant in your town, then that car plant and the people who work there, their earnings are going into the restaurants and the stores and the gyms and the activities and the school and all of the entire community. So that's one reason why a big company like that losing money is a big deal and therefore gets reported. And the second is publicly traded companies have to report their numbers quarterly. There's a lot of information about the state of those companies, which makes it easy for journalists to write about them. So they do. And you'll find that kind of information in the Wall Street Journal and the big business-focused publications like Forbes and The Economist, those kind of things.
Absolutely. Some large private companies are reported about in those periodicals, publications, but it's less likely and usually less comprehensive because they don't publish information about how they're doing. Companies like Mars Confectioners are notoriously tight-lipped. Rumor actually has it that contractors brought in to fix machinery are taken through the factories blindfolded.
That's secretive.
Yeah. However, the company is talked about in trade publications such as Candy Industry and Food Business News, which are real things. So yes, in case you're wondering. And if you were to try to find out where your company is being talked about, just Google company name, right? Your company's name, like BuzzFeed or Mars Confectioners, Manager Tools, Trade Magazine. If you get a lot of results, I would suggest restricting your search to the last year. So include the year. You also have access to your company's press releases and marketing, which I don't think many people leverage that, but you do.
No.
And you might look at those and see what messages the company is sending out. How does this message differ from internal messages, from, your corporate departments, your boss? Usually internal messages about financial difficulties precede public announcements. If your company is publicizing difficulties, the situation is pretty dire. You're behind the curve, essentially.
Yikes. I just learned that my QA senior manager that I hired 30 days ago is not showing up next week because she's taken another job. How did that happen? With the hot job market of today, as a hiring manager or HR professional, there's more to hiring than the interview itself. Although that's important, and we teach you how to maximize your interviewing effectiveness, the organizational process and your communication and behavior for the first 180 days is critical. Let Manager Tools come on site to your organization to deliver our Effective Hiring Manager Conference. Contact Maggie at manager-tools.com or go to our website and type #organizations in the search bar. The next hint is your department falling behind. So if you work in a department that is being singled out for extra attention by executives, then you should get your resume ready and start looking for something new. So for example, Verizon bought a number of online properties, including AOL and Yahoo, that we talked about earlier, and they laid off a significant number of people in the beginning of 2019. But a new CEO was brought in for that division in October 2018. And that's a sure sign that something is going to change. And if you know that you've got a new CEO and your department has been losing money, it's bad. Verizon Media was affected by the same digital advertising revenue issues as BuzzFeed was. So if you're in digital advertising and BuzzFeed is losing money, and you work for Verizon, it's a hint. Your company, your division might be about to struggle too. And even the description of a senior leader can give you a clue that your department is being targeted. So the new Verizon CEO was described as, he does not have a reputation as a visionary or a risk taker, nor has he inspired the cult-like following that Armstrong, his predecessor, has. Rather, he is known for operational skill, quiet execution, and process-driven leadership, which, if you can read the subtext, means cost-cutting and efficiency. And that was just one paragraph that I found that described him. There were others that were much more blunt about he's coming for cost-cutting. And if you've got a new CEO who's got a reputation for cost-cutting, layoffs are coming. Like in 3 to 6 months, that's all you've got.
Next, cost-cutting. If you're being asked to cut cost, you probably have 6 months to a year to find something new. Cost-cutting usually starts with minor things like a crackdown on expenses, or perks like employee childcare or gyms reduce their hours. Maybe subsidized lunches are less subsidized. Maybe you request an upgrade to your equipment and you're asked to hold off for a little bit. Those are the first level signs. The next level is a crackdown on what you can and cannot expense. You might be asked, for example, to account for all calls that you're making on your company phone. You might not be reimbursed for your personal calls. That's a big sign. You might get a per diem instead of being able to spend whatever you need when you're traveling. These kind of things, these are signs. And the more inconvenient the cost cutting is to you, the worse the situation is. Quite frankly, any focus in that area about cost cutting, unless it's clear that we're doing this because it's no longer necessary, then you need to pay attention.
Yeah. Next on the bad news list is hiring freezes. And when you get a hiring freeze, you probably have 3 to 6 months to get hired somewhere new. Labor costs are a significant part of the costs of running a company. It could be up to 70% of the total business cost. So if somebody is trying to reduce labor costs, they're looking for really big levers in improving the revenue or the profitability of a company. If you're just fiddling around the edges with expenses, it's not so bad. When you get to labor, it's like they're cutting off an arm to save the rest of the body. And hiring freezes are rarely enough. Rarely have we seen it that a hiring freeze put a company back in the black and prevented layoffs. They usually have 3 to 6 months at the outset, at the outside, and then the layoffs come.
Another sign might be secretive meetings. If meeting rooms are being booked out, but no one knows what for, or there's people you don't normally see from corporate around, right? HR or legal people are wandering around. So if you see those things and one of our previous conditions has also been met, layoffs are happening right now. Most people are told they can't tell anyone else what happens during those meetings so that panic isn't caused. And so if people you know are going to the meetings and coming back unwilling to say what's happening, it's almost certainly layoffs.
It's never a good thing when people are going to meetings with HR and legal and they're not saying what they're about. And there's some benign thing on the online office booking thing. It says this office is booked out for HR meeting. That's not a good sign.
Mm-mm.
So being laid off is difficult. We know it. We've been through it. We know thousands of people who have been through it. And in fact, anytime someone else makes a decision about your career by firing you, by moving you, by changing your job or laying you off, it's difficult. We want you to make your decisions about your career, not other people. And that means staying vigilant. It means looking out for the signs, and when you see the signs, taking action so that you can choose what happens next, not someone else. That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more guidance.